Hello students, this is my second video, continuation of the first one. Here I am going to continue with the poem after Blenheim. So let's start. Sixth stanza. It was the English, Caspar cried, who put the French to rot. But what they fought each other for, I couldn't make well out. But everybody said, quoth he, that 'twas a famous victory. Here Caspar tells the children that the English defeated the French, but he could not tell why they fought, and he could only say that it was a famous victory. Here, his ignorant nature can be figured out. Caspar was ignorant, like any other ordinary people. He did not want to question the authority. He did not want to question even himself that why that kind of battle, that kind of war was won. So in the sixth stanza we are talking about how the ordinary people's attitude are. Now here rot means complete destruction and defeat, and quote, that is said, an old English word. In this particular stanza, alliteration is used in the third line, fought each other for. F sound is repeated twice. So repetition of F sound. Now seventh stanza. My father lived at Blenheim then, yon little stream hard by. They burnt his dwelling to the ground, and he was forced to fly. So with his wife and child he fled, nor had he where to rest his head. Now, what happens as a result of war? Caspar's father's house was also burned, which made them homeless. Now, they had to leave that place. They did not have any place to go, where to go, they did not know. So, in this particular stanza, we are talking about the horrors of war and how the civilians, how the common people suffer at the hands of war. Here he says, Caspar says that my father lived at Blenheim, then means that time my father used to live at Blenheim, just nearby the stream, just nearby that river. They burnt his dwelling to the ground, and here they refers to the people who were the part of the war. They came and they burnt his dwelling to the ground, means his dwelling, his house was turned into ashes, and he was forced to fly. And Caspar's father's family was forced to leave that place. So with his wife and child he fled, nor had he where to rest his head. They ran away from that place in order to save their lives, but they did not know where to go after this, what's going to happen with them. So in this particular paragraph we are talking about the horrific aspect of war, right? And there are such expressions such as burning houses, homeless people with no food and shelter. The poet leaves his readers to ponder many more things which war gives. The poet wants the readers to think about, is there any outcome, ultimate outcome of the war? Now, the next stanza, eighth stanza. With fire and sword the country round was wasted far and wide, and many a childing mother then, and a newborn baby died. But things like that, must be at every famous victory. Now, in this particular stanza, the poet is talking about like fire and sword destroyed everything. Like these were the weapons, these like sword and many other weapons, fire. These were the measures taken. So with the help of these things they destroyed everything. Many pregnant women and infants died. Such things, Caspar ironically says, takes place at every battle where there is a great victory. So now this is the universal outcome of any war: destruction, bloodshed, pregnant women dying, rotting of corpses. These things are the common images can be seen anywhere, anywhere in the battle, anywhere in the war. Now childing mother here refers to mother expecting a child, means pregnant woman. Alliteration is in the second and fourth line. Second line, wasted far and wide, so W sound is repeated. And then fourth line, newborn baby died, so B sound is repeated twice. Now, refrain is there. Children, I just want to make you a note here that refrain is actually the repetition of a phrase or a line or a group of words, right? So, in this poem, refrain is used with various variation, right? So, variations are there. Famous victory is a refrain because in many of the stanzas, you will get this particular phrase is repeated again and again. Now, the next stanza, that is the ninth stanza. They say it was a shocking sight after the field was won, for many thousand bodies here lay rotting in the sun. But things like that, must be after a famous victory. Casper tells the children that thousands of dead bodies lay rotten in the sun. Means the thousands of dead bodies were rotting in the sun. There were nobody here and there, only the dead bodies all around. There were nobody to even, give them a proper place. There were nobody to take these dead bodies to the graveyard. So the number of dead bodies were infinite. So he said that they say it was a shocking sight. So when the bodies were all around, rotting under the sun, so it was obviously a shocking sight. For many thousand bodies here lay rotting in the sun. Thousand or thousands and thousands bodies were rotting in the sun. But things like that, must be after a famous victory. And towards the end of this stanza, Casper admits his common attitude. It shows his common attitude that he says that things like that it happens whenever there is a famous victory. Meanings are given just below. You can see, students, the field was won means the battle was won. Here field is actually, metonymy. Field refers to battle. So substitution of word is called metonymy. As I've already discussed before, that metonymy is substitution of words. Now, refrain is again used here, famous victory. As I told you, that refrain is the repetition of words, repetition of phrase, repetition of sentences. So that is called refrain. Famous victory here is refrain. Now the next stanza, 10th stanza. Great praise the Duke of Marlborough won, and our good Prince Eugene. Why, 'twas a wicked thing, said little Wilhelmine. Nay, nay, my little girl, quoth he, it was a famous victory. Now, in the 10th stanza, the Duke and the Prince are praised, but Wilhelmine finds it a wicked thing. She says that no, it cannot be a thing which can be praised. She says that it was a wicked thing, it was an evil thing, killing so many people, letting the bodies rotting under the sun, pregnant women dying, newborn babies crying. So all such things happened in the war. It must be a wicked thing. She questions her grandfather, but the grandfather ultimately says that no, no, my little girl, he said it was a famous victory. Means these things are the common, phenomena. It happens in any famous victory. Refrain is again used, famous victory, in the last line of this stanza. Now, Duke of Marlborough, two characters are here introduced. Duke of Marlborough, he was an English general, commander of British forces in the war. And Prince Eugene, Austrian general with Marlborough, he defeated the French at Blenheim. So, with their collaboration, they won this battle. Now, the last stanza of the text is 11th stanza. And everybody praised the Duke, who this great fight did win. But what good came out of it at last, quoth little Peterkin. Why, that I cannot tell, said he, but 'twas a famous victory. In the 11th stanza, the poem ends with everyone praising the Duke. Peterkin asks what good has come out of war, but all Caspar could tell was that it has been a famous victory. Now everybody was praising Duke and Duke of Marlborough and Prince Eugene, but little Peterkin, this poem ends with the question of the with the innocent question of little Peterkin. He asked this question that what good came out of it, means what was the good outcome, what happens actually. Nothing happened good actually at the end. He said, Casper said that I don't know what good was taken out of the war. I only knew that it was a famous victory. Children, at the screen you can see the picture of Duke of Marlborough and Prince Eugene, which collaboratively they won the battle. So the pictures are here on the screen. Just have a look. After this, now the poem is over. Stanza by stanza, we have discussed about the poem. Now we are going to start about themes. So there are three major recurring themes in this poem. Definition. In general, first of all, you understand what is called theme. The theme is the central insight or controlling idea conveyed in the text. It may be the author's thoughts about a topic or view of human nature. So you remember, a theme is the central insight, that recurring idea. The theme is that recurring idea which the poet wants to, which the writer wants to convey. Now, in context of the poem after Blenheim, there are three recurring themes. We are going to discuss one by one. First one, man's cruelty to man. Now, war is futile. Nobody gains anything at the end. Here, the old Casper concerns about the great victory, even at the cost of death and devastation. But the children, uncorrupted by the prejudiced perceptions of the adults, does not perceive the so-called benefits of war. This poem reflects the utter cruelty of people and their horrific deeds like burning houses, ravishing women, killing pregnant women, butchering newborn babies, and letting the corpses rot just on the name of war. So, this poem after Blenheim portrays the man's cruelty to man, how the man has become cannibal, right? How they become cannibal when a war, when a battle is being fought. So it happens in any war. There are many expressions, there are many images which are portrayed by the poet, as you can see in the last four lines, like burning houses, ravishing women, killing pregnant women, killing newborn babies, letting the corpses rot. It will give you a kind of shiver that how cruel the people can be when a war is being fought. Now, the next theme is curiosity and the lack of it. Children are curious by nature. When Peterkin finds a skull, he brings it to his grandfather and immediately asks him what it is. Wilhelmine then asks him to describe the war, but old Caspar is only able to describe what the war is, where the war is fought, and between whom. He was unable to tell the causes of war and its benefits. He never feels curious about these things. Now, here you can see the distinction between the difference between children and adults. Children are curious, whereas adults are not. You can see the difference between Casper, old Casper, right? Just like ordinary people, he is not curious about why the battle was won, why the battle was fought. But children have this question, that is there any good outcome of the war? And they repeatedly ask this question from old Casper. Now the third theme is complacency. Now, complacency means lack of awareness. When you don't want to accept the when you're not aware of the reality, and even you don't bother about the reality. So here, complacency can be seen in old Casper's, personality, in his character. Old Caspar accepts the loss of innocent lives in the Battle of Blenheim as price of the glorious victory. In the poem, he keeps on stressing that victory was famous and great, but is ignorant of the cause of the war. Casper's complacency is like that of the modern politicians who dismiss the deaths of innocent people in war by referring them with the impersonal phrase collateral damage. Now, I just want to discuss with you about this particular term, collateral damage. Collateral damage is accidental injury to non-military people. Non-military people means civilians, the common people. So it is an accidental injury given to the civilians, the common people, to non-military buildings which occur during a military operation. So that is called collateral damage, when civilians, when common people are killed, when common property is killed, right? Not actually killed, when common property is destructed, and when common people are killed during any military operation. So that kind of damage in the lives and property is called collateral damage. So, just like any other modern politician, Casper's complacency can be seen here when he refer, the outcome, the horrors of the war, by with an impersonal phrase, that is collateral damage. Now, moving towards the next section, that is anti-war poetry. Now, after Blenheim is an anti-war poetry, but how it is anti-war poetry? For understanding this, you need to understand what is anti-war poem. So, an anti war poem reflects the horrors of war, like burnt houses, civilian casualties, like those of pregnant women and newborn babies, and rotting corpses. Now, this poem is an anti war poem because it portrays the horrors of war. The poet is not in the side of the for the side of the war, but against the war. In this poem, particularly, I'm not talking about Saudi in general. I'm talking about the poem in particular. Particularly, I'm talking about the poem. So this poem is anti-war poem because the poet, you know, goes against the war notion. Now, besides Saudi, Siegfried Sassoon, Edmund Blunden, and Robert Graves are some of the notable anti-war poets. Apart from Saudi is called, the earliest, one of the earliest poets who wrote about, about the horrors of war. So he is one of the earliest poets. After that, Siegfried Sassoon, Edmund Blunden, and Robert Graves are also known for their notable works, which is in the genre of anti-war. Now, after Blenheim is a scathing criticism on the horrors of war. Through the character of old Caspar, the poet reveals the typical inability of a common man. So through the character of old Caspar, he wants to portray he wants to show the typical inability of a common man to grasp the reason behind the war. The expressions such as skulls beneath the earth found frequently, piles of rotting dead bodies, dying pregnant women, newborn babies, burning houses, running civilians, and many more expressions like that. Thus, the innocent children become the mouthpiece of the poet who expresses his disapproval of war. So, here, innocent children are the mouthpiece of the poet who wants to disapprove war. But here, old Casper, he represents the incapability. He represents the common people, those who are incapable of doing anything. Now, the next part, what is the form and structure of the poem? So, the form of the poem is ballad. The poem is written in the form of ballad. At first, you understand what is ballad. So, ballad is a long narrative poem. Narrative poem means it narrates a story. So, it is a long narrative poem. Now, after Blenheim narrates the story of Caspar and his two grandchildren engaged in a conversation about the famous battle. And here, battle refers to the Battle of Blenheim. So, the form of the poem is a ballad. Now, the structure, if you look at the structure of the poem, each stanza of the poem contains 6 lines, right? And in each line, the meter which is applied, that is iambic tetrameter. Iambic tetrameter means one particular syllable you will find it is stressed and then unstressed. As you can look at the picture, iambic tetrameter definition is also given, and along with that the example is also given. So you need not go through in detail for 9 standard. You simply remember that the structure is each stanza is divided into 6 lines, and the meter for each line is iambic tetrameter. Now, the rhyme scheme which is followed in this poem is A B C B D D. So, in almost all the stanzas, the rhyme scheme is the same, but only the second stanza varies. In second stanza, the rhyme scheme is not A B C B D D, but it is A B C D D D. Now, the next section, that is refrain. Refrain is repeatedly used, in the poem after Blenheim. So the poet has repeated the phrase the great victory and the famous victory with little variation. As I told you before, that these words are used again and again with little variation. Means something is changed, but the idea is the same. It has been used to emphasize. Now the question arises why it is used, why the poet has to repeat a particular expression again and again. So the answer is here. It has been used to emphasize the ignorance and complacency of common man about the purpose of war. It is ironic that the famous and great victory causes thousands of death and infinite suffering to common people. Now, although it is called a great and famous victory, but this is ironical that it is called a famous victory, a great victory, and because of that famous and great victory, so many people lost their lives and had gone through infinite suffering. Now, turning towards the next part, that is irony. Irony, this is the last part of this video, and it is a very important part also. First of all, you understand irony is how irony is implied here. And I am going to start with the definition of irony. Irony is what? So it is difference in appearance and reality, or expectation and result, or meaning and intention. So basically, I'm talking about only three kinds of irony here: dramatic irony, situational irony, and verbal irony. Now, I'm going to start with the verbal one. Verbal irony is when words are used to suggest the opposite of what is meant, that is sarcasm, double intended meaning. So, verbal irony, children, like I have given you first of all, means before that also I've given you such examples. For example, suppose a class is shouting and the teacher went there and see a shouting class, a disturbing class, and the teacher says, "What a good class." So, there is a verbal irony. The teacher does not intend to tell the class that the class is good. The teacher intends to tell that the class was really disturbing. So he says just the opposite. There the verbal irony is. Now dramatic irony is a contradiction between what a character thinks and what the reader or audience knows to be true. Now, a dramatic irony is implied. Suppose the character is in confusion, the character doesn't know the reality. So, the thought process of a character is different. He doesn't know the reality, but the audience at the same time knows the reality. So, there is dramatic irony. Dramatic irony is used, very dominantly in the dramas of Shakespeare. Now, the last one is situational irony. Situational irony is used in this poem after Blenheim. An event occurs that directly contradicts the expectation of characters, readers, and audience. Right? So, this is called situational irony. In any event that is just the opposite of the expectation of the reader. Now, here Casper says it was a famous victory, it was a great victory, but we, the audience, know that no, it was not a great victory because it let all the civilians, let all the common people suffer infinitely. So we know that it was not a great victory. Now, talking about the poem in particular. The poem reflects on the horrors of war. It shows how a war is futile through the character of innocent children. However, it is ironical that the poem glorifies the outcome of the war in the form of great victory at the cost of huge destruction both of life and property. It is ironic that old Caspar calls the battle famous and great, even knowing what actually has happened then. His gruesome descriptions, followed by his casual saying, create a kind of effect, an effect of irony in the poem. So this particular thing is ironic when the Casper talks about all the suffering. He talks about what actually happened, how their family had suffered, and towards the end of his speech he says that it happens, it's a normal thing. He accepts whatever has happened, and he calls the battle a famous victory. Now this is ironic when you're talking about your grief, when you're talking about your suffering, and at the end of your speech you are saying that no, it was a good thing. So this is ironic. Now, children, thank you for watching this video. Here we have completed the poem after Blenheim. Having any doubt, you can ask your questions in the comment section of this video. I'll always be there for you all. Right? We'll see you soon.